Okay, so we're on Nun Vav Amud Aleph, about the sixth wide line. It's 56A2 at the end of the second paragraph. Rav Yehuda Omer Ratza Kosev Basula. So if you want, you can write the basula that you will give her 200 zuz, but she already accepted 100, which she didn't really accept it, but the Mishnah has a machlokas that basically you have to promise her the right amount, but Rabbi Meir holds you're not allowed to pretend that she's not allowed to forgive part of it. Rabbi Yehuda says she is able to forgive part of it in the form of writing that she's already received the partial payment. The Rabbi Yehuda, so the Gemara asks, the Rabbi Yehuda to Kosman Shover. Does Rabbi Yehuda hold that you're really allowed to write a receipt that a debt has been partially paid? And we turned the page here already, if you're in the art scroll side. But we learned in a Mishnah, Misha par chovo, if someone paid back part of his obligation, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yachlif, Rabbi Yehuda holds you have to exchange the original loan. Let's say you borrowed $300 and you paid back $150. So what are the two options? The one option is you have a new additional contract that says $150 has been paid back. The other option is you rip up the original $300 IOU and you write a new one for $150. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Yachif, you have to exchange the original $300 IOU for a new one that's only $150 because we are assuming right now, our Gemara is assuming that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to write that you don't write a receipt for partial payment. Rabbi Yossi says Yichtav lo shover. He could write a receipt, or which is like a separate document, acknowledging that he has received part of the money. So how come here Rabbi Yehuda is in our Mishnah says that she's allowed to forego part of the ksuvah by writing the receipt? If from that other Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda holds you don't write receipts, you'd have to write a new shtar, and if you'd write a new ksuvah, you'd be writing a ksuvah that has an amount of less than 200 for a basula, which is not allowed. So I'm Rabbi Yirmiyah kishishovarta mitocha. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says normally Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow you to write a receipt to show that a debt was partially paid, but here it's actually in the text of the ksuva itself. It's already written that she's foregoing it. So when you would have two different documents to keep track of, one document of the original loan and one of the partial payment, then Rabbi Yehuda is against that. But when you could incorporate the partial payment into the original document, Rabbi Yehuda is okay with writing the shover because it's just one document. Abaye Omer afilu temak she'ein shavarta mitocha. Abaye says no. Even we could still reconcile Rabbi Yehuda and say even if the shover, the receipt, is its own document, he would allow it in this case. Bishla mahasa vade pare. Because there he definitely paid Dilma Mirkas Tvarta. Maybe he's gonna lose this receipt, Umapik Leishtara. And then the lender is going to produce the original shtar for the original $300. Bahadar Gave Zimna Achrina, and then he's going to collect the entire debt a second time. But Hachavada Yaivla. But in our case, did he definitely make a payment? Milsa ba'amahi da amrele. She's just giving him words. So meaning this is everything everyone's agreeing this is a sham. He didn't pay her part of the ksuva. Rabbi Huda just allows her to forgive the ksuva by participating in the charade that it was partially paid off. Natre. So if he has it, he has it. The shover saying that he already paid half of the ksuba. Ilo natre, and if he didn't keep track of it and he doesn't have it, he didn't put it in a safe deposit box. He's causing himself a loss. So in this case, Rabbi Yehuda is not worried if he ends up having to pay twice. Normally, in a regular case where a debt was definitely partially paid off, we shouldn't. So how does it work in halacha? The person who is owed the money would write would write receipt. So if someone borrows money the borrower would write this IOU and the lender would hold on to it. Once the debt was paid off, the lender would give it back to the borrower, and the borrower would probably rip it up because it doesn't have a purpose anymore. So in the case of a ksuva, the woman can collect the ksuva, so she holds on to the ksuva, and then if it would be collected, then she would give it back to the husband, and he would rip it up. So when you would write a receipt for partial payment, so let's just keep the case of ksuva. So the wife has her ksuva, and the husband would have this receipt that it was partially paid. If he would lose the receipt and she would come with the ksuva, he would have to pay the full amount. So since he never paid partial, we don't mind. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't mind that he's going to have to pay the whole thing now. But in a regular case where Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon, so Shimon has the document. If Ruvain paid part of it, then Shimon would give Ruvain a receipt. I already received $150 from you. So Ruvain would be real careful with that, would want to be careful with it, because if he doesn't have it to produce, Shimon will make him pay the full amount again. But because maybe it's not so easy to keep the whole thing, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't want that to happen because he doesn't want, I guess, Ruvain to be pressured. I mean, we don't know the exact reason, but he doesn't want Ruvain to have to keep that safe, and then in the case he didn't keep it safe, he's going to have to pay the whole debt again. So he's paying more than what he borrowed. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda is against. But since in this case the husband never paid the first thing, Rabbi Yehuda is not offended if doesn't have a problem if the husband is going to have to pay the full amount, because he never made a first payment. The whole thing was a charade. So Bishlam Abaye lo Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, we understand why Abaye didn't give the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah's answer was when the receipt was already written in the original shtar, in the original ksuva, lo katani shavarta mitocha, because our Mishnah is not talking about a case where the receipt is written in the ksuva itself. Rabbi Yirmiyah, my time lo Amar Kabaye. Why doesn't Rabbi Yirmiyah want to give Abaye's answer? That Rabbi Yehuda is only concerned about overpaying, or having to pay more than what you really owe. The Gemara says, Gezerah shover dehacha, atu shover de alma. Because Rabbi Yirmiyah holds that we made a gzera against having a separate shover here because of regular shover. So, meaning because Rabbi Yehuda is against in other cases of writing a receipt, because in case the borrower loses a receipt and you have to pay the whole thing again, the Chachamim made a gzera that we don't write receipts at all. So it's true, the logic of about the gzera.
Yeah, and I mean, furthermore, I was going to say, a lot of this doesn't apply nowadays. A ksuba, we don't make a carbon copy of. All debt documents, we do nowadays.
Because halachically, if you make a copy, is that really what's a legal copy?
A legal copy
Yeah,
is a signed copy.
right. But if you make a photocopy of it, that's only a photocopy. It's not original.
It doesn't matter. You can't tell nowadays an original from a photocopy. Once it's a signed document, it's the same as they're the same. They're the same document.
No, but there are some a lot of organizations they don't take copies, they take original only, right?
Yeah, I just had to write a letter for someone that they were Jewish for Israel, and I sent them the PDF. They're like, "No, she needs the original," so I had to mail the copy. I mean, that's not even as legal as what you're talking about.
Really, they accepted it when I was Ira. Your father sent
Probably certified by third party for bank or whatever else.
Right, it has to be notarized and this and that. So the stamp of the notary, even nowadays, things that are as digital as we are, the notary still has to stamp it with a physical stamp, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that in those days, it wasn't so easy to make copies. We're not even sure if everyone was able to write.
Absolutely.
And in regular shtaros, there's a halacha of who has to pay for the scribe to write the shtar.
Right.
But since Rabbi Yehuda doesn't
in those days, didn't the Beit Din hold some of these documents?
Sometimes, not usually. We learned a while ago about was it about the Chronishal Tzipori, that if someone was signed, I think in the second parak, in the register of Tzipori, or maybe then they were considered that they were and it said like HaKohen, then we knew that they were a kosher Kohen and they could even do avoda in the Beis HaMikdash. But that's because everyone there had been vetted. But in general, people held on to their own shtaros. In regard to Shemitah, before Pruzbul, the Gzera of Pruzbul was enacted, one way to be able to collect the debt if it wasn't paid before Shemitah was to give your shtar over to Beis Din. But in general, people probably kept their own shtaros. Okay, so next, the Gemara says, time of the kasvale. So then the next thing we're pointing out is that the Mishnah says that when is she able to forgive the ksuva if there's a written record of her acknowledging partial payment. So the implication is if it was only an oral, if she said in front of witnesses, I am telling you witnesses that I already received half of my ksuva payment, it wouldn't work. Again, the Mishnah says if it was written that it was partially payment, it's okay. So the Gemara is making a diuk that if it was a verbal announcement where she told witnesses that she received the payment, it doesn't work. The husband still has to pay all 200. So if you turn to 56a4, amai, why doesn't it work? Davar sheba mamon hu, it's a monetary thing. V'shaminan le Rabbi Yehuda da amar davar sheba mamon t'na'al kayim. But we know that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that conditions made on monetary transactions, Tanai works. And why wouldn't it work? We'll see the this brisa right now. The Tanya, because we learned in the brisa, you are betrothed to me. He's being mekadesh a woman on the condition that he doesn't have to pay for her clothes or food or to give her marital relations. Now that's really the definition of marriage. He has to do those three things. So if he wants to marry her and basically on the condition of not owing her anything that a husband owes a wife, that they are married and his conditions are null and void. It's a full regular marriage. He owes her everything that a husband owes a wife. Diva Rabbi Meir, this is Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda Meir, Bedavar Sheba Mamon Tanal Kayim. But Rabbi Yehuda says in a monetary condition, the condition stands and they're married and he doesn't owe her food or clothing or marital relations. So we see that he allows you to make conditions on monetary things. So why should the ksuva be any different? Just like there, an oral condition is a good condition. So why wouldn't her acknowledging in front of witnesses that she had received payment, why doesn't it work? Because Rabbi Yehuda ksuva derabanan. Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that ksuva is only rabbinic. The chachamim asu chizikli divrei yoser mishal Torah, and the chachamim strengthen their halacha stronger than Torah. So if it would be a Torah obligation, if it was a Torah obligation, you could make it tonight. But the chachamim, in order to strengthen their own condition, made it stronger than Torah, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that the chachamim said that you're not allowed to make it tonight in this situation. So in order to strengthen their thing, they made it even that even though on a Torah level you could make it tonight, but on their rabbinic law, you're not allowed to make a condition. So then the Gemara asks us a few questions if Rabbi Yehuda really holds that way. Hare peiros drabanan v'lo avdu rabbanan chizuk. The fact that a husband is allowed to, so if a wife brings certain property into the marriage, we learn that the husband isn't allowed to sell them or to use the principal of the fields, but he's able to benefit from the derived benefit. So meaning if it was an apple orchard, he's allowed to make money from the apples that it produces, but he's not allowed to do anything to the field itself. So that obligation that the husband is allowed to use the peiros that a field produces, but not derive benefit from the actual value of the field itself, that's a rabbinic enactment. And the Chachamim did not make a strength in that. It's not, because we learned in a Mishnah This Mishnah is on Pei Gimel Amud Aleph in about 17 more blot. Rabbi Yehuda Omer la'olam hu ochal pere peros. So he can always use the fruits of the fruits. So if you did something with the apples, which is already not from it's from the field, but it's not from the principle of the field. It's something that it generated. I think when we spoke about this a few weeks ago, I used the word income that the field generates. But the Gemara calls it the peros, the fruits. So then if you did something with the fruits, and so it's 2 degrees now separated from the field itself. The field produced the apples. And with the apples, you bought chickens. I don't know. So he's allowed to always use that stuff unless he writes I don't have anything to do, literally judge and words. I don't have, or law and words, I don't have with you and your property and with their fruits or derived benefit and the fruits of their fruits forever and ever. So in this case, he is allowed to make a stipulation that he is not going to use the peros that the Chachamim explicitly, especially gave him right to use. So how come the condition that he makes there works on a derabanan, and the condition here about paying the ksuva, which is only the Rabbanan, they made it so strong that tonight doesn't work at all. Because we turn to Nun Vav Amud Beis, and we say in Amud Beis v'kaimalan, and we also hold when the Mishnah says that he has to write, I'm not going to get anything from you or your property or the peros of your properties. My kosev omer, and in that case, even though the Mishnah said kosev, the Gemara says that he doesn't have to literally write it in a document, but he can verbally state it. So how come there the Chachamim didn't strengthen their gzera and say that you can't make it tonight? So Rabbi lakol yesh ksuva v'lo lakol yesh peros. Every marriage involves a ksuva. Not every marriage has property brought in from the wife. Milsa deshchicha avdu be'rabanan chizuk, something that was common. The Chachamim had to strengthen it to make sure that it wasn't abused. But milsa deshchicha lo avdu be'rabanan chizuk. But something which was not so common, the Chachamim didn't strengthen it to make sure it wasn't abused. So it's true that the Chachamim said if she brings certain type of real estate into the marriage, even though he can't touch the principle of the real estate, he's allowed to derive benefit from the income it generates, like the fruit. But that's not such a common thing, and therefore the Chachamim didn't make it super strong to prevent abuse. But for ksuva itself, even according to the opinion that ksuva is only midrabanan, because every marriage has a ksuva, the Chachamim were extra strong and didn't let you make an oral condition. So now the next question: Harei chamarim deshchichi, donkey drivers, which is a common case, la'avdu re'rabanan chizuk, and the Chachamim did not strengthen their words. Did not, because we learned in the Mishnah. Hachamarim shenichnasu le'er, if donkey drivers came to a city, va'amar achad mehem shalichara. So we're talking about damai. I think we mentioned damai a week or two ago. So damai is produce that from an amaretz, not a learned person. And these type of people, they definitely separated trumos, because there's a death penalty if you don't separate truma to the Kohen, but they didn't separate meiser to the Levi. And the problem is that part of with the meiser that goes to the Levi then has to take 10% off of that and give it to a Kohen. So within this produce that we're not sure if the meiser is taken off, there's some truma embedded in it, so it's called demai. So we have to separate the maestros, or the meiserishon at least, for that. And we mentioned, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, that in certain cases we believe the person, and for the Mishnah explicitly says on Shabbos we believe them, that because of the kedusha of Shabbos they're not going to lie on Shabbos about this. So what happens if these donkey drivers, which is just a class of people about which the institution of demai, which is a rabbinic thing, we're worried that they didn't, in order to save a few money and not separate the extra meiser, they didn't separate the meiser. So if he says shali chadash v'shal yashan, mine is new and my friend's is old. So Rashi brings two explanations. The first and the primary explanation Rashi says is that my stuff, it hasn't been dried out enough. Let's say it's produce that it's better when it's dried out. So mine is newer and his is older. So his is better because it's fully dried out. And then Rashi brings a second opinion that it's talking about literally chadash and yashan in regard to the laws of yashan. My stuff is from the new crop since Pesach, and you're not allowed to eat it because we didn't bring the Korban Omer, or the second day of Pesach didn't pass. And Rashi says that's not true because the whole problem of Demai only has to do with Meiser, not with the halacha of Chadash, of Yashin and Chadash. So he's just saying my produce is old and my new. So for this, this statement doesn't seem to have any, according to Rashi's primary explanation, this statement has no halachic significance. The person is just telling me, look, I'm selling this, he's selling that, his is higher quality than mine. But there's no halachic difference. According to Rashi's second explanation, there is a halachic difference. He's saying, mine is chadash and his is yashan. There's a halachic problem with mine. But Rashi says that that's not the real pshat. And here's where the important line is. Shali ena mesukan v'shachaver mesukan. Mine is not fit to eat because I didn't take meiser off, but his shmerels over there, he did take meiser off. Ein amanin. We don't believe them. And so even though he says that the other guy took off meiser, he's from the type of people that are not believed that they took off meiser. But Rabbi Yehuda says nemanim. Rabbi Yehuda says that he is believed. Now, if I'm not mistaken here, there's a halacha called gomlin, and I don't know what a good word, a translation for gomlin is, but what the word gomlin means is I scratch my back, you scratch your back. So basically, there's let me just explain the idea with the joke. The joke is that two guys were begging outside a big church in New York City, and one guy was visibly Jewish and one guy was visibly Christian. And because the two guys were sitting next to them and it was right in front of a church, people were ignoring the Jew and giving money to the Christian guy. And then finally, the priest comes out from the church and says to the Jewish guy, look, I've been watching all day and no one's giving you money. Maybe you should go somewhere else. So he turns to the Israeli and said, Shmira, look who's trying to give us business advice. Meaning that they were both Jewish and they were raising money by one looking to be like a goy, which, by the way, is a halachic problem to pretend to be a goy if you're not, in general. That's a shot, but that's so. But the point is that they did a trick in order to make more money overall. So this donkey driver is saying my stuff's not so good. So why would he talk against his own stuff? The reason is we're choshesh, we suspect that really it's not true, but the business model makes it that the people will buy from his friend, and his friend is going to give him a kickback for saying this. So I guess the word gomlin is that we're worried about a kickback. And especially with the trial of former Alderman Burke concluded. So it's a good thing in the annals of Chicago to talk about kickbacks. So the Chachamim are worried that they're in cahoots, and he's talking down his own product that the people will buy from the other guy, but then he's going to get a kickback. But Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we believe him when he's talking about the other thing. So the whole problem of Demai is only D'Rabbanan. And the case of these type of people selling this type of product is a common situation, similar to ksuva, that all women need a ksuva when they get married, unlike something that's unusual, that we said that the wife brings in the real estate to the marriage. So how come there the Chachamim didn't strengthen their halacha and say we don't believe this one donkey driver? Yeah, here. Note 11 in the art scroll, the kickback scheme. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the competitors are not to be trusted out of concern that they are involved in a charade in which they take turns in favoring one another. It is only for a rabbinic prohibition of Demai that Rabbi Yehuda is lenient and relies on their testimony. So this charade in which they take terms favoring another, I think it's really talking about a kickback scheme. That's how I understand this. But last time I couldn't think of a good word for, I just said the Gomlin means you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Now I think a more accurate translation would be a kickback scheme. So the Gemara, Amar Abaye answered, Vada did of the if something is certainly a problem, the Chachamim strengthen it, and you'd need to be absolutely sure. But Safik did of the But since the whole idea of Demai is maybe they really did take Meiser, and Demai is a special stringency, midrabanan, maybe they didn't take off Meiser, so the Rabbanan didn't strengthen it since it's based in doubt. We don't know that there was a problem to begin with. Rava Amar, but Rava says, B'dmai kilu. In Demai, they were lenient. So Rashi says, Demai, they were more lenient than any other suffix Rabbanan, because it's not really a suffix, because the majority of the regular people really did take a meiser. So according to Abaye, this comes into the level of a suffix. And according to Rava, it's really not even on the level of a suffix, not even a level on a doubt. So then what would be the nafkamina? What's the difference between it? So in certain situations, well, I'm not sure. I was going to say in certain situations, let's say if in a certain cases, maybe the demai got mixed up in a certain big ratio, according to Abaye, you could use a sveka, a double doubt. But according to Rava, you wouldn't even need to make a double doubt to make it mutter. So in certain shilas, it would be more lenient, according to Rava's answer, to say that this food, mixture of food, would be okay than Abaye. That's a possible nafkamina. Okay, 2 dots. Rabbi Meir Omer Kol HaPoches. So Rabbi Meir says whoever gives less than 200 for a basula or 100 zuz for an almana, it's as like they're having a bi'ila znus, which literally is I don't know, an incestuous relationship, but an adulterous relationship, an inappropriate relationship. So kol hapoches afilu bitna. So this means even if he made a condition. So it sounds like Rabbi Meir holds that if he tried to make a condition, I'm marrying you on condition that I don't have to pay you 200 zuz for the ksuva. I'm only going to have to pay you 100 zuz for ksuva. So it seems that Rabbi Yehuda says, that Rabbi Meir holds to know batal v'isla, that the condition is nullified and she gets the full amount. But since he said to her, I'm only going to pay you 100 zuz, and really she deserves 200 according to Chachamim, lo samchadaita, she didn't really agree to it. And therefore, if they would have marital relations, it is a promiscuous, according to the art scroll, I think uses the translate promiscuous, but it's an improper, immoral relationship. So the Gemara asks, from what we saw a few minutes ago, it's an obvious question. We learned a few lines above, or on the previous Amud already, that Rabbi Meir holds that if you try to make a condition, even a monetary condition on a kinyan, on an acquisition, on a diraisa, the full effect, your condition is nullified, and the acquisition, the transaction takes place in a full way, as if you didn't make any condition. But if we make a diuk in that clause, that's only if it's a Torah law. But if it's only something that's rabbinic, it should work. And the ksuva is drabanan, so the tanai should work. So the Gemara answers, ksuva Rabbi Meir, ksuva diraisa. Rabbi Meir holds ksuva is a diraisa. We saw back, I think, on daf, was it Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel's opinion of it being diraisa, and opinion in Tosfos. We spoke about is in general, many Rishonim hold that the ksuva is diraisa, but some Rishonim will hold that details of the ksuva might be drabanan. So you might hold ksuva is diraisa, and there are certain obligations that you have, but they could also hold, like Rabbi Yehuda, that that the amount is drabanan. So you could split the hairs a little bit and say the ksuva itself is diraisa, but the 200 zuz is only drabanan. Tanya, we learned in the Bryce, Rabbi Meir Omer Kalapochis Abasulim Masayim Manaman Harezu Bilas Nus. So whoever gives in the ksuva or writes in the ksuva less than 200 zuz for a basula or 100 zuz for an almana, it is an immoral relationship. Rabbi Yossi Omer Rashai. Rabbi Yossi says he is allowed to reduce the amount of the ksuva. Rashi points out that this is even an oral condition. And Rabbi Yehuda Mer Ratza Kosov L'B'sul Shtar Shal Masayim. Rabbi Yehuda says if he wants, he could write her a shtar that it's a 200 zuz ksuva. But he Kosov so he's gabat me michaman, and she's allowed to write, I've received 100 zuz from you. Ulamana mana. And if it's a case of an almana, he writes 100 zuz for her. And he can write to her. She writes to him that I received half of it. I received 50 back. So the three opinions are Rabbi Meir holds you're not allowed to reduce it at all between 200 or 100. Rabbi Yossi says you're even allowed to make the condition orally. And Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Yossi that you can make the condition, but he holds it only works if it's a written condition, not an oral condition. Those are the three opinions there. So V'sav Rabbi Yossi Rashai, does Rabbi Yossi really hold that you're allowed to make a condition that you don't owe the full 200 zuz for a basula's ksuva or 100 zuz for an almana's ksuva? Or mini, I'll ask you a contradiction from a different brisa. Ein osin ksuvas isha metaltalin mipnei tikkun olam. You're not allowed to make a ksuvas isha with movable property because for the benefit of society. Because the value of metaltalin is much more volatile than the real estate market, than the value of real estate. And it might not be worth the amount that she's owed in case of a divorce. Am Rabbi Yossi v'chi ma tikun olam yesh bezu v'alo ein ksuvim upochsin. Rabbi Yossi says, what benefit for society is this? The price isn't set, and they can go down in value. Poches means less, so it means they could be worth less. So, well, what exactly is a machlokes? They don't seem to be arguing. So, Tanakama nami ein osin kamar. The Tanakama, the first opinion in this brisa, holds that you're not supposed to make, you can't designate, I have a truck of Air Jordan shoes in my, I have a storage locker with Air Jordan shoes. So those shoes are going to be worth, enough money to pay for the ksuva, but they're movable stuff. Maybe some new basketball player is going to be even more than Michael Jordan, and his shoes are going to be worth a lot, and it's going to make Michael Jordan's the Air Jordan's not worth so much. So you can't, even though you're saying this storage locker of stuff is security, or this is what the ksuva is going to be paid for. Elalav. So what is Rabbi Yossi saying? That they go down in value. They both seem to be saying the same thing. Elalav hachikamar. So this must be what the Bryce is talking about. You're not allowed to, the Tanakama is saying you're not allowed to designate movable property as the ksuva if you didn't accept responsibility. But if you said, I guarantee that I will pay the 200 zuz, even if these shoes will be worth less than that, I promise to keep them as if they're worth 200 zuz. So he made an assurance that even if their value goes down, he's gonna make her right and pay the full amount. But if he accepted responsibility in case that they're not there anymore, but actually, okay, so Rashi says, so it's true what I said originally, they may go down in value, but in this case, he's worried, what if they get stolen? So the Tana here holds, according to Rashi, it's the last Rashi on Vav Amud Beis, that this Tana is not worried that they're going to go down in value, but they're worried maybe there's going to be some ones and they're going to be lost or damaged and not going to be worth the money. Va'as Rabbi Yossi l'meimer, and then Rabbi Yossi comes to say, Ki kibul avachrayos amai osin. Even if he accepts responsibility in case they get damaged or stolen, why are you still allowed to pledge them for the ksuva? V'alo ein ksufim upochsin, because they can go down in value. So now that we're reinterpreting, now the Brisa makes sense, because the Tanakama is only talking about the problem of them being lost, and Rabbi Yossi is saying, well, besides for being lost, they may go down in value, and even if he would pledge in case that they would get lost, it's not okay. Maybe they're going to go down in value, and then the women whose husbands promised to pay their ksuva through certain movable goods, that may not be worth their 200 zuz or the 100 zuz that they're owed. So that's not good for society. That's not tikkun olam. So hashdoma hasam dedilma pachse. So this brisa now is saying maybe these movable properties, movable goods, are going to go down in value. Chayish Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is worried about such a concern. But so he's saying these shoes are worth 200 zuz. But Rabbi Yossi is saying, well, maybe the value for Air Jordans are going to go down and it's only going to be worth 150. We can't let her get married because she needs to have all 200 zuz. But what did the Brisa just say? We had the three-way machlokes between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Yossi says you could even make an oral condition that I'm marrying you on condition that I only have to pay you 100 zuz for ksuva. So there he's definitely going to pay her less than 200. How come Rabbi Yossi in the ksuva in this three-way Bryce machlokes is saying you're definitely allowed to make a condition to not pay her a full 200 zuz, and in this other Brysa, he's so worried about she gets paid up, you're not even allowed to pledge movable property in what's the word? It's mortgaged. It's security that this storage locker of Air Jordans is the security for that I'm going to pay off the ksuva, because he's worried maybe it's going to go down in value and she's not going to be made whole. She's not going to be paid all 200. What does Rabbi Yossi hold? So hachi hashta, is this really a question? Hasam lo yada de sachil, but hachi yada v'kamachla. There's a difference. When he said, I'm going to marry you on condition that I'm only going to pay you 100 zuz, she hears the condition and she accepts it. He was very clear with what he was going to give her. But there, in the case of the real estate, of the movable goods, she doesn't know the volatility in the market. She doesn't really know what's going to happen. So she is more okay. Rabbi Yossi holds that she is amenable when you tell her. So Rabbi Yossi holds that it's basically the level of certainty or uncertainty. When she knows for sure she's going to get 100, that's still okay because there's a certain thing that she's guaranteed. If he's only saying that he's going to give her movable, because we don't know that the value of those movable goods are still going to be worth what she's owed, that uncertainty is not okay. So this isn't the only pshat, but talking in terms of certainty and uncertainty, I think is a good way of explaining the differences between these two brises in Rabbi Yossi. But actually, the words itself, and maybe I'm being a little too cute. The word is that if he makes a condition, she is literally saying, "I'm okay with it. I'm forgiving you half the price." But in the case of the movable property, she didn't forgive him anything. She's expecting the full ksuva, and if they go down in value, she's not going to get it. So therefore, she's not going to get what she agreed to. So it's not exactly certainty and uncertainty. So my certainty and uncertainty could be a secondary or tertiary explanation, but the real pshat is when he spelled it out, because it's clear she forgave that extra 100 zuz or the 100 zuz. But in the case of the movable property, she accepted the kedushin from from him, expecting that she's going to have a full ksuva. So she didn't forgive him anything. So if it goes down in price, it's not good for society, tikkun olam, that he's securing the ksuva through movable property. Now the last few words here. The sister of Rami Bar Chama was married to Rav Avia. Return to Ninzayin Amud Aleph. Erchas ksuvasah. She lost her ksuva. I mean, she lost the regular star. Also came to Rav Yosef. They went to Rav Yosef and they said, "What do we do? She lost her ksuva." Amar Luhu. He said to them, "Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel." This is what Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel says. Zug divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. What's the problem? The problem is if you don't have a ksuva, then it's like you'd be having an immoral relationship. So Rav Yossi says that's only Rabbi Meir's opinion. But the Chachamim hold if she lost a ksuva, she could wait a couple of years without a ksuva, and it's not a problem. But if it's long term, more than a couple of years, then you need to fix the ksuva and get a new ksuva. So Rabbi Yossi, at this point, the Gemara is saying if she lost a ksuva, it's not a big deal. Only according to Rabbi Meir, would you immediately have to write her a new ksuva? Amarle Abaye said to Rabbi Yosef, V'hamar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel halacha Rabbi Meir b'gzeiros of. But Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel that we pass like Rabbi Meir when it's a gzeira. It's true. Normally, it's machlokas Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. We pass like Rabbi Yehuda, but when Rabbi Meir makes a gzeira, we do passing like Rabbi Meir. Rashi says gzeiros of his decrees, something where he's stricter than Dvar Torah in Isser v'Heter. So something mutter or aser, basar v'chalav, or was this shachted properly? Those are cases of Isser v'Heter through gzeiros. So Ihachi, then Rav Yosef said, Ihachi, if so, that we have to pass on Rabbi Yossi, Zilk Sovla. Go write her a new ksuva. So before we go into the Gemara here, let me just read the halacha in Shulchan Aruch. This is in the very first siman of Hilchos Kesuvos in the Shulchan Aruch. So the first halacha is you're not allowed to be secluded with your kala until you write her a ksuva. And the husband has to pay the sofer to write it, etc. Then the second halacha is if he's not able to write a ksuva like it's on Shabbos or he forgot to write it, he can give her movable goods and take responsibility for it in case they'd get lost or go down in value. And then they could be together. And then once it's after Shabbos, then they have to write the ksuva. Gimel. Im kasav l'ksuva v'navda o shamachla shekasav leiska b'al t'ksuvas yitzarach lichtav acheres be'ikar ksuva sha'aser la'adam lisho siv ishto sha'achas lo ksuva. If you wrote her ksuva and it got lost, or she forgave him because she the Rama adds specifically in a case where she wrote a receipt that she received it, you need to write another ksuva with at least the basic amount of ksuva, so 200 or 100, because it's forbidden to be with your wife one moment without a ksuva. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says, and that's our Gemara. So there's something strange. No. I think it looks like a chafaf. It's supposed to say nunvav. So then the Ramah, a city that was taken over by a militia, or the people were thrown out of the city. They were exiled from the city, and the women lost their ksuvos. They need to give them new ksuvos, even though we might say that we might be able to find it later, or they'll be allowed to go back to their city. But once the ksuvos are in the chazaka, the status that they have been lost, they need a new ksuva. If you don't know the amount of the ksuva, if some of the ksuvos still exist, so it seems that some of the women were able to leave with their ksuva. So we just look, what's the minhag in this community for a ksuva? We follow the amounts in those ksuva, meaning we know that it's 200, 100, but there's certain, we learned much earlier that the Kohanim family did 400 and 200 because they were meyuchas families. So if we know that a certain place had a custom that they wrote a specific amount, we would follow the ones that were written, even if they were only a minority. Meaning, let's say there were 50 women, and 5 of them had their ksuva, and it said 300. So for the other 45 women whose ksuvas were lost, we'll write that their ksuva is 300, even though we don't know. But if not, if we don't have any ksuvos, we judge according to ziknei ha'er, according to the elders of the city, and according to the custom. The wealthy according to his wealth, and the poor person according to his poverty limited budget. When a ksuva is lost and they come to write another ksuva, you have to write it with the original amount. So let's say he gave her 10,000 in the original and it got lost. He's not allowed to only give her 200. So if he originally wrote her 10,000, it got lost. When he replaces it with the new ksuva, he again has to write 10,000. And see later on that in a place where, and this is important, in a place where you're only allowed to get divorced if the woman accepts it, because originally, according to the Torah law, a woman can be divorced against her will. She doesn't want to get divorced, it doesn't matter. The husband has control. However, you don't need to write, but in a place where they would only let the divorce happen if the woman agrees to the divorce, some say you don't have to write her an uksuva. Because the ksuva is partially a safety net or a defense for her to prevent the husband from acting hastily. But if there's a safety break, unlike the yellow line train, but if there's a safety break that stops him from divorcing her too hastily, in this case, it's the fact that she has to consent to it, then it's not the end of the world if she loses her ksuva, because she has that other safety valve to stop the marriage from ending quickly and suddenly. If so, Bisman hazeh b'mdinas elu, in this nowadays, in these countries, she'ein begarshin bal korcha shel isha mishum chen Rabbeinu Gershom, that we don't divorce against the will of the wife as part of the chen of Rabbeinu Gershom. About 1,000 years ago, Rabbeinu Gershom made several takanos. One of them is you can't read other people's mail. And the big one is, the big one that everyone knows is you could only marry one wife. But a different one was, you can't divorce a woman against her will, even though we pass like the Chen Rabbeinu Gershom, you might think that you're able to be lenient and not have to rush out and write a new ksuv immediately if she loses it. Aval ein hamin hakein ve'ein l'shanos. That is not the custom, and you're not allowed to change it. So that's what the Ramah says about this halacha. There were 2 times where I was told, so lost a ksuva, please, write them a new ksuva. And in both cases, a day later, I was told that's okay. So I ended up not having to write any of these. So I've never written it, but I had gotten ready to do it twice. So it is an important halacha. If she loses it and she realizes she loses, sometimes they don't realize for a while if they don't lose it, because let's say she keeps it in a certain place. If she didn't look in that place for a while, she doesn't know if she lost it. But then if she looked and it's not there, then it's a problem. Okay, Kiyasa Rav Dimi, we're on 57A1, the new paragraph on the left side. When Rav Dimi came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, Rav Shimon ben Pazi, Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara. Rav Shimon ben Pazi said in the name of Rav Yeshua ben Levi in the name of bar Kapara. Machlokas betchila, the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yossi held that you're allowed to verbally make a condition that you're not paying the whole ksuva. And Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be in writing. So the machlokas is at the beginning. But at the end, everyone agrees, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda both agree she's not able to forgive the rest of the amount of the ksuva. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, but Rabbi Yochanan said, bein bezu machlokas. Machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yeshua applies in the beginning and in the end. Amar Rabbi Abahu says, Lididim farshali minei Rabbi Yochanan. I was explained by Rabbi Yochanan. The Ana of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lo pagina adadi. That Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi are not arguing on each other. Because Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, it was Mishum Bar Kapara, that the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda was only at the beginning, but not at the end. And Rabbi Yochanan says they even argue at the end. So Rabbi Yochanan says, me and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi aren't arguing at all. My betchila to come Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, tchilas chuppah. But my sof bia. We're using different words. But we're talking about the same situation, but we're using different words. Rabbi Shua ben Levi said, "Tchila," beginning means the beginning of chuppah. Umay sof bia, and what does it mean at the end? At the end of the when the consummation took place, was consummated. So let me just tell you what Rashi says. So this is what it means. From the beginning of chuppah until the end of the chuppah is a machlok between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi holds she can forgive part of the ksuva, and Rabbi Yehuda holds she's not allowed to. But once they consummated the marriage, Rabbi Yossi agrees that you're not allowed to, she's not allowed to forgive part of the value of the ksuva. And when Rabbi Yochanan says, when I said at the beginning, at the end is a machlokas, tchilas chuppah v'sof chuppah. I meant the beginning of chuppah and the end of chuppah. They're arguing. But if she could be mocheles or not. But by the sof bia, he agrees that she's not. That Rabbi Yossi agrees that she's not allowed to be mocheles anymore. The sof chuppah shehid tchilas bia, the end of chuppah, which is the beginning of the consummation. So basically, we're just saying that when Rabbi Yeshua, it ends up that according to both Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi, who's the more lenient one in allowing her to forgive part of the debt of the ksuva or the obligation of the ksuva, that's only until the marriage is consummated. But once the bia takes place, even Rabbi Yossi agrees that she's not allowed to forgive any part of the ksuva. So that's what the Gemara is saying now. He also when Ravin came to Bavel, he said it a little differently. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara. The same people. Machlokas lebesof. The machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is at the end. But at the beginning, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that she can forgive the ksuva. She can say whether she's saying I accepted it, or she says I accepted it because I'm forgiving part of it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan says bein bezu machlokas. The machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda, is in the beginning and the end. In this case, Rabbi Yochanan is a little bit stricter in what Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda is talking about. Rabbi Bo, and Rabbi Abahu said, was Rabbi Bo last time? Yeah, it was Rabbi Bo. Lididima farshli minei Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan explained it to me. The an of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi lo palkina nadadi. Me and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi are not arguing. My lebesof dam Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. What's at the end of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that he says that they're arguing about? Tchila sof chuppah, the end of chuppah. Umay tchilas chuppah. And what's at the beginning? The beginning of chuppah. When I said there's machlokas in both, that is at the beginning of bia to machlokas, and sof bia is also machlokas. So there's a big nafkamina. According to the first version of this, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that by the end of the consummation of the marriage, she's no longer allowed to forgo or forgive part of the ksuva. And here, according to this version, Rabbi Rabbi Yochanan is saying at Sof Bia, there's still a machlokas that Rabbi Yossi still allows her to forgive part of her ksuva at the end of the consummation of the Bia. Amra Papa says he loved Rabbi Abo. If not for what Rabbi Abo says, that he said that Rabbi Yochanan said that he and Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi don't argue. They're just beginning and end. They're talking about different things. There's three things going on: the beginning of Bia, the beginning of Chuppah, the end of Chuppah, and then the Bia. So there's different time periods, and they're calling the same thing by different names. If not for Rabbi explaining this, if it wouldn't have been that Rabbi Yochanan explicitly said that he and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi aren't arguing, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi pligi. I would say that the machlokus is between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and Rav Dimi v'Ravin lo pligi. But Rav Dimi and Ravin aren't arguing, because when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he gave one thing over, because Rabbi Yochanan was an Amor in Eretz Yisrael. So Rav Dimi or Ravin had to come from Eretz Yisrael and tell them in Bava what Rabbi Yochanan taught. So I would have thought that the machlokus was between Rav Dimi, that the machlokus between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav Dimi and Ravin were not arguing, because myself to Kamar Ravin, when Ravin says, Ravin was the second opinion. The second version of this, when Ravin says that the machlokus is at the end, I would have said that that's sof chuppah, the end of chuppah. But once the marriage gets consummated, no one would, even Rabbi Yossi would agree you're not allowed to change. She's not allowed to forgo part of the ksuba. Well, my tefillah to come Rav Dimi, and what's the beginning that Rav Dimi? He was the first version. Tchilas bia, the beginning of bia. So the end of chuppah and the beginning of bia is the same case, and they're saying that the machlokus is about that. But since Rabbi Abo said that Rabbi Yochanan says that he and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi don't argue, so I would have, we know that Rav Dimi and Ravin are arguing. So my Kamash Milan, what's Rabbi Papa telling us that I thought it was machlokus Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, but now I know it's machlok between Ravin and Rav Papa. If not, I would have said that that Ravin and Rav Papa agree, and the machlokus is Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Papa, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So hachi kamashmal, and this is what Rav Papa is teaching us: the pligi trei amoraya taimedin afshayhu v'lo pligi trei amoraya li b'dachad amora. In general, it's more safer to assume that two amoraim are arguing with each other in their own reasoning. And not say that two Amoraim are arguing within an earlier Amora's Shita. So basically, just like we have Rabbi Shmuel's Brisa tells us how to make drashos. Basically, the Gemara is saying here, when you have a machlokas amoraim, and you could either explain it that two amoraim are arguing on each other, or two amoraim are arguing within the shita of a different amora, we should say that they're arguing with each other. So Ravin and Rav Papa are arguing with each other; they're not arguing within Rabbi Yochanan. Now, I think, I might be wrong, but I think that this is different than Tanaim, because many times the Gemara is trying to figure out who's the Tana of a certain brayso. So we've seen it in our Masechta also. Sometimes the Gemara ends up saying it's two Tanaim according to Rabbi Yehuda. I'm just saying Rabbi Yehuda. Let's say Rabbi Yehuda says this, Rabbi Yehuda says that. Then the Gemara is going to say there's some inconsistency between that. How could he hold this and how could he hold that? So then the Gemara answers that it's two Tanaim arguing about what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is. So for Tanaim, we will say that. For Amoraim, Rav Papa is saying we won't say that. We're not going to say that two Amoraim are arguing within an earlier Amora's opinion. It's more correct to say that they're arguing directly on each other. Mishnah. No besula shnei masar chodesh mishativa habala leparneses atma. We give a basula 12 months from the time that she was. We came across this term before, but a tavia is usually you come with a claim. So he claims, but in this case, it's not like a bad claim. He's giving her an offer of marriage. So she has 12 months to prepare herself. So with tachshitim, with jewelry and stuff. Now in the Megillah's Esther, we learned that there was 12 months that they would sit in perfumes and oils for 6 months in this and 6 months in that to get their skin soft, maybe to get the hair out and then smell good. So it's not exactly the same thing for King Achashverosh, but it is 12 months for her to get ready. And just like she gets 12 months, we also give the man 12 months. So Rashi says to get everything ready for the meal and the chuppah. Now, obviously, they weren't going to be shachting early because they didn't have freezers in those days. But in order to make the arrangements and to, I guess, collect the money and this and stuff and that to make the wedding meal. But a widow, a woman who was previously married, doesn't get 12 months. For her, it's only 30 days. So it's interesting that the Rashi says she doesn't have to worry so much about. I'm using the word tachshitin, but it says she already has. So because she was married before, she has most of the stuff she needs. So she doesn't need so much time to get stuff together. I was wondering if you could almost think of it as a wedding shower. So when a basula gets married, she's never had a house before, so she needs a shower to get stuff that she needs. If she's a widow, she had a shower, so she has most of the stuff, but some cups broke, some forks got lost. So you need to just get a few more things. It's not as a big deal to make everything whole. But again, Rashi says it's tachshitin, so it's more personal items than stuff that would be for a wedding shower. But either way, the logic is pretty similar. Higias Mavaloniso, and I think we saw this all the way at Daf Beis or Daf Gimel. What happened if the 12 months happened and he didn't bring her to the chuppah? Ochlos mishalo, she has to eat food from him. He has to start supporting her with food. Ocheles betruma. And if he's a Kohen, she's allowed to eat truma, even though they didn't actually get married yet. Rabbi Tarfon Omer knows, and this is on the Diraisa level, but midrabanan, she's not allowed to eat truma until she's fully in his house after chuppah. Rabbi Tarfon Omer nosin lahakol truma. Rabbi Tarfon says that he's allowed to give his wife 100% truma. Rabbi Akiva Omer mechza chulin mechza truma. But Rabbi Akiva says he can give her up to 50% truma, but not more than 50% truma. And what's the reason? Because if she would become a nida and she would be tmeya, she's not allowed to touch or eat truma. So since she's not allowed to eat the truma, what good is it going to help her if she's a nida? So that's what Rabbi Kiva says, you can't give her more than 50% truma. But Rabbi Tarfon holds that you can give her all truma, and for when she becomes tmeya, she sells some of the truma and buys regular food with it. Now, we mentioned, as I think as recently as last week, because the demand for truma is much less than the demand for regular food, truma food is worth not so much. So why is this really giving me enough to support her? Rabbi Tarfon holds yes. Hayavam eino machal b'truma. So what happened if they did kedushin, but before the 12 months, the husband dies, so now she has to do yibum. So the fact that now that the 12 months didn't happen, she's connected to the Yavam, his brother, eino machal b'truma. The connection to him is not strong enough to let her eat truma after the 12 months are up. Well, let's say it was 6 months that she was engaged to her husband, or they had kedushin with her husband, and then he died. So then it's another 6 months with the Yavam, and now it's 12 months. Or afilu kulam b'fnei abal chasir machad b'fnei Yavam. Or what if for 353 days, it was 353 days after the Kedushin, and the next day is going to be a year. And then what happened? Her husband died, and now she's Yibum. It's just one day that she's connected to the Yibum, but it's that last day. Oh, or after one day after the Kedushin, the husband died. And so now for 353 days, I'm talking about the regular lunar calendar year, she's connected with the Yavam, Eino Ocheles B'Truma. She is not allowed to eat Truma. So when the Mishnah says that she's allowed to eat Truma after a year, that's only if it's with her husband. If he dies, even if she has to marry the Yavam, his brother, she does not get Truma. It's only the connection for her husband, not the Yavam. The Yavam wasn't the one who gave her Kedusha. Zu Mishnah Rishona. This is the original teaching, but based in Shel Achareihem Amru, but a later based in said, Ein ha'ish achas b'truma at shedikanas l'chuppah. A woman is not allowed to eat truma until chuppah. So even if the husband didn't do things the right way and it took him more than 12 months to marry her, even though midiraisa she'd be allowed to eat truma, midrabanan she's never allowed to eat truma until she's married to him. I think the Gemara in Kedushin, well, the Gemara is going to say one of the problem is that if she's with her sibling, she's still in her father's house, she might give the truma to her siblings, and there's a death penalty for that. And for whatever other reasons, we do not allow her to eat truma until the chuppah takes place and she's in her husband's house. So we'll leave it here. God willing, we will meet again next week and continue here on the top of Nun Zayin Amud Beis.